In 1904, St. Louis hosted the World's Fair to commemorate the centennial anniversary of the Louisiana Purchase. Built on 1,200 acres, the fair featured over 1,500 buildings, with showcases from across the world and exhibits representing each U.S. state. Of the original buildings, only 12 remain today, including the Connecticut State Pavilion, now known as the Haan Mansion.
Connecticut decided they were going to do something that was very historical, which was different than most of the buildings, and this was supposed to represent a gentleman's country home. It was patterned after the Lydia Sigourney home in Hartford, Connecticut, which was built in 1820, and a lot of the components were taken from the 1760 Hubbard Slater mansion in Norwich, Connecticut, and so a lot of those were hand-carved before the Declaration of Independence. This house at the fairgrounds was really one of the favorites. Although it was very small, it was very homey, and people just felt like it was the home of their fathers.
In particular, Mrs. Fanny Potter, the young wife of Lafayette attorney William Potter. She fell so in love with the house that at the close of the fair, she insisted her husband make an offer, and the mansion was purchased for $3,000. Piece by piece, it was dismantled, numbered, and sent by the Wabash Railroad. Mr. Potter hired an architect to make the necessary changes for family living, including converting the first floor veranda into a kitchen, the second floor administrative offices into bedrooms, and replacing the plaster exterior with brilliant brick. The rebuilt mansion was one of the grandest houses and happiest gathering place in Lafayette's historic 9th Street Hill neighborhood. But when the house passed to the second generation, the community gatherings ceased.
We lived in the neighborhood, and so we would walk past and say, wouldn't you just love to see the inside of that house? And we never dreamed we would. And I asked the wrong person the right question and ended up with a house. I think it was love at first sight. The form was nice, but it was in horrible condition. But when you looked at the center staircase, it just had such character.
Over the years, the Haan family worked tediously to repair the mansion. In order to afford the renovations, Ellie and her husband Bob did much of the work themselves, replacing the electrical and plumbing systems, refurbishing woodwork, and even hanging wallpaper, all in an effort to restore the home's former glory.
When you have something that's very historic, it has a story, and it's important to us that it keeps telling the same story. It's a community treasure, and people are always curious about buildings that have not been open for a long time. We had people come knocking on the door and saying, I'd like to have a wedding here or this or that. And it was a pretty good feeling to share the house.
Even as the home became a community gathering place once again, Bob still felt like something was missing.
We were sitting in the drawing room one night, and I said, you know, Ellie, we should have an art collection. She says, that sounds like a good idea. And I said, why don't we make an Indiana art collection? She said, that's a good idea. And that's how it happened. And from there we started. We bought all the books we could find on Indiana art, and we both read all the books, and I would go through and look at the pictures all the time until I got in my own mind a firm view of what good art was and the good artist, then we knew how to pursue it, and that's what we did.
Today, the Haan's collection is considered the best collection of Indiana art in the country. Over 100 artists are represented, including celebrated painters from the Hoosier group such as T.C. Steele and Otto Stark, as well as members of the Brown County Art Colony. In addition to the paintings, visitors can enjoy a stunning display of American Renaissance Revival furniture seen throughout the home.
We had no plans to make a museum when we bought the house. It just so happened it got to the point where other museums started coming and borrowing pieces. We realized that it was a really important collection and it was important to keep it together. We feel that the Indiana artists are among the best in the whole country. A lot of these artists could have gone to New York and become wealthy and much more famous than they did in their lifetimes, but they loved Indiana and they chose to paint here, and their work is just really incredible. And we want other people to know what it is.
The Haans continue to add to the museum, including many contemporary paintings and decorative ceramics, highlighting over 100 years of Indiana tradition. In 2015, Ellie and Bob stunned the Lafayette community when, after 30 years of calling the mansion home, they gifted the property to the museum board of directors.
We didn't feel that we could make the museum successful and gain the public support we needed as long as it was our personal house. It would just still be people going to see Bob and Ellie's house. We'd like to get to the point where people all over the state know the museum and want to come here to see the art. I think it gives them a sense of pride in their heritage to understand about Indiana art, and I think if you're a Hoosier, you're not considered as cosmopolitan as somebody from New York. But if you have art from the Hoosier land that's as good as any other art from any area, then all of a sudden you feel a little better about your state.